Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Break Free for Your Monkey Wing podcast, Season 2, Episode 4. Thank you again so much for joining me. My name's Tony Gordon. I'm the host of this podcast. Last week, I did announce that we're going to have a guest on, Nancy from Australia. But because a couple of things that came up off the back of last week's episode, then Nancy will be coming on at a later date. I wanted to do something different today. I said off the back of that, some comments I got from last week. If you remember, the episode last week was around bullying, and it was myself and a person I know, Mark from Dublin, Mark Lestrange, and we spoke about our personal experiences concerning bullying when we were younger and how it affects other people now and even younger kids these days because of social media, and how that can enhance sometimes the people's issues both from a mental side of bullying as well as the physical side, which is more really, we looked at the time when we were discussing it last week, and more impacted us was the actual physical side because the way our situation was. But looking back on it, actually was both, because mentally you're worried about the next day happening again because you face it all over again. But I appreciate when we said that also, it's harder for younger ones these days because social media means that they never switch off. And we were looking at ways possible to do that. Anyway, something that came out after it was a comment that somebody made to me. It said that they were surprised at me make myself so vulnerable. You're a coach, a therapist now, but you're telling people now you were bullied and how that's affected you. And I was quite surprised for different reasons. One, that they would actually think that it was an issue. We never remembered someone else saying this to me. When I put the first episode of the podcast out in season 1, I put that out to explain why I set the podcast up. Because the premise of the podcast was to help people, to empower them to actually go to GPs or to their therapists, whoever they were seeing, and say, I don't want to just be medicalisation only, I would like to see alternatives. So I wanted to introduce them to different holistic, alternative, complementary, different types of modalities or medicines that may be able to help. And I was told then by someone, they were surprised that I made myself so vulnerable because it explained about my situation, the breakdown I had, the way that I've had to go on a journey to find myself, to find how to deal with this myself and what had happened to me, because I've got a long-term illness. And I'm progressing really well with that journey, and I'm really happy how it's going for me. And a lot of the people I've spoke to, I've started to realise there is more things out there and they're looking into that. But then the vulnerable part kept coming back into my mind. Why was someone worried me being vulnerable? Did I make myself vulnerable? Were people going to look at me different now or treat me different because of what I've said? And I started to think, why am I actually thinking this? Why was it bothering me? And I thought, if I feel that way, surely other people must be concerned when they hear that word. So I actually tried to think of, possibly, what is it I think vulnerable is? And I thought, I'm vulnerable because I've disclosed things about myself that maybe, like they've said, make me look a bit weaker, maybe make me look not strong enough or can actually deal with these situations if someone else came to me with them. Because average of this is it still a problem for me? And it really made me think about myself and look at myself and say, well, what is vulnerability? So the idea of this podcast this week was, what does vulnerability mean to you? Not to me, but to you. And I'll discuss what I've found from it and what I felt. The first thing was I looked up a dictionary and I wanted to know what the dictionary said the vulnerability was. And it said this: a willingness to show emotion or to allow one's weakness to be seen or known, willingness to risk being hurt or attacked. And when I read that, I actually put it in red writing in front of me and kept looking at it. A willingness to show emotion. Oh, what's wrong with showing emotion? Everybody does. We show emotions every day, day in, day out, at different times. Joy is an emotion. Happiness is an emotion. When you're fulfilled, you show an emotion. So excitement, you could keep going. So why would I worry about that? Then I looked at the second part. To allow one's weakness to be seen or known. Is it a weakness? Because I had a breakdown, do I look at that as a weakness? I've said I wouldn't be the person I am just now if I didn't have it. I wouldn't be, to me, as mentally capable of helping others the way I know I can now if that didn't happen to me, because I would have had trouble empathizing with them. I can never understand what it's like for them because I'm not in their shoes. I don't know day in, day out what their life is like. Unless I could do that and actually be in those shoes, I cannot say I understand, but I can empathize. because I've been through situations like that, I can empathise at what it's like to be in such a dark day, what it's like to think you don't know you don't know how you're going to deal with the next day when it comes. You don't know if you want to deal with the next day when it comes. You don't want to go to sleep at night because you don't want to wake up in the morning to through it again. Yeah, if that's a weakness to people, then yeah, I admit that. I've been through that. But I actually took that as an opposite thing. I learned from a psychotherapist, Avendy, or a clinical psychologist, that my rules in my head was I always had to be strong. I had to be powerful. I had to deal with anything. And I couldn't. And probably those rules didn't help me to do it. What I needed to be was flexible, malleable, compassionate, have acceptance. What I mean by that is I had to accept I have got imperfections. I have got to accept I've got flaws. I had to understand that I couldn't break my way through everything. I couldn't do everything and think I'm perfect all the time. I'm imperfect and I've got a lot of imperfections. But at the same time, they make me who I am as a person. And I wouldn't want to be without them. I had to learn them. What do I do when they happen? What do I do on a daily basis so that I don't get brought down by that? And the last bit of that, the definition was willingness to risk being hurt or attacked. Well, that's exactly what I've just said. I'm willing to live the dream every day, and I'm willing to put it out there that other people know that. I got this bit from somebody, well, you not feel that vulnerability means that you're something to be ashamed of. Well, no, it doesn't. And I know a lot of people talk in the same terms with vulnerability and shame. I don't agree. I agree there is some shame in it, but you make that yourself. I don't agree that other people should make you feel that way because of it. My thinking on it for me is that my vulnerability is allowed me to take my shield down, the one I was holding up all the time. Because that shield I had in front of me was deflecting things away that I probably needed to hear or needed to see or need to deal with. But I didn't, because I always had that thing up in front of me. Yeah, I'm going to strong, batter everything out the way. That's not the way you need to be. And I was totally wrong trying to be that way. But I didn't know any different. I was brought up in an era, I suppose, that's the way men looked at, that you could deal with everything and anything, and you didn't let anybody else know. So by saying I had a breakdown or I was bullied and I've had to deal with that, did that make me weaker? No. Does it mean I'm ashamed? I said at the time when I had the breakdown, I felt ashamed on the day. Not of the breakdown itself, but of the fact that I got that far because I didn't know how to ask for help. That was the shame that I actually felt. And that wasn't vulnerable then. I was ashamed of the strength that I had that stopped me asking for help. I don't want other people to feel that way. And I would like people who listen to this to think, not necessarily what I'm saying about how I feel about it, but put what you feel about it. As I said, I might be able to empathise with you, but I can't understand. Your circumstances will be different from mine. This is how I thought of this since this happened last week, and what it actually felt like when people said that. And I actually felt sorry at times for when the people said it to me, because I don't think they actually understood what they were saying. The other one actually meant it, as far as I know, was a compliment, because they didn't expect me to put myself out there and be vulnerable. But the way they used the language and the tonality made me think, oh, they were actually not impressed, the right word, but they felt it was good that I'd actually done that, that it would help me by doing it. And I think when I did these things and put them out, I actually told my psychologist that I felt therapeutic that I've done that. I've let a lot of people know at one time. I could have told one person at a time, but I'd had this for so long, trying to be something I wasn't. And that's what I've realised with this. I realised that the vulnerability is not disclosing. Some people associate that with it, but it's not. You can disclose yourself, you don't need to be vulnerable. You can disclose things about your life because you want people to know. It doesn't make you vulnerable. It just depends on their interpretation of it. Things that can actually cause people to feel vulnerable, I was looking these up, and they're quite a vast amount. Mine was the illness, because the way it's put in it, your survival brain wants you to take cover because you've lost strength or the ability to fight or to run, like flight, and freeze. I was all three, I think, at one time because of this illness, different parts of the time. I've been through all three of them. I've been through the fact that I can fight all the time up until the incident happened. I froze that day when the breakdown happened, because that's what happens to you when you do that. I didn't know what was going on. So I literally was freezing. All emotion just sort of came out of me, and I stopped. And I started to think then what was left, and it was a flight. And the flight for me was actually growing wings to go forward. That's the flight that I've took, and that's my choice. I will keep going forward with this, because I know the empathy guilt has made me better at what I do. I always believe myself to be a great coach. I could coach anybody, and that's what I feel. And I love this job. I love doing it. Some people say, but you're a therapist more than a coach. I combine both. The therapy side, I work with the past for people, like I've had to do for myself. And the coaching side helps me to take them forward. So with that, it's a combination of the two of them. And that's what I do. I provide both for people, not one or the other. They can go to a counsellor and get one. They can go to another coach and get one. I will provide both. And there's a lot of people out there that can help if you know where to look. The other things he got as well, one that was said here was a sensitive personality. People who feel threatened in general. Yeah, there's people like that do feel away. One example gave me was someone who said they're an introvert. And what they were trying to do is to basically be an extrovert. They were trying to mix in, and they did everything against their own beliefs and values, internally, beliefs and values. But all it did was make them feel worse. They didn't actually feel any better. They felt so bad and so low because they realized they kept trying to force themselves to be something they're not. And by doing that was making them actually feel worse. So the respect that they actually felt in the first place was, I don't really want to mix. By putting themselves out there and trying something that wasn't them, they were feeling, oh, I shouldn't have done it in the first place. They just did it, but wrongly. But it was good. They made the effort. People who keep in an abusive relationship, now that could be as a child, an adult, anything, and it could be mental, physical, whatever it is. They can feel vulnerable because of the situation they're in. They feel vulnerable as they don't know what's going to happen next. Or if they let people know what's going on, they'll get the blame because it's their fault that they're abused. People will always put all these feelings, emotions, thoughts through themselves. So that can be a way that they feel that. But also getting older. You can feel vulnerable because you get older, or you're retired, or financial worries and everything that comes with it. An example for me this week was my dad. My father's 87. He's 88 actually next Wednesday. He had a bad fall recently. And remember, I'd say 87, he's frail. He had a bad fall and he fractured his bones in his pelvis. He's in hospital. He's going to be in for a long time. But when he was in the hospital, one of the first things I went up, he said to me that he doesn't like the way he's feeling. I went and asked why. He said, because he's now looked at himself and realised he's not what he thought he was. He's still in his mind, he was 40, 50 years old, which still appeals me. I think it's still old, but to him, he worked on a railway track all his life. He's a very strong, powerful guy. And now there's this little bag of bones that he's now looking at. He didn't really use a mirror, but he sat at the hospital and saw himself. And it really took something out of him. Some part of him, like his soul was like, just disappeared. One of the first things in my life, he gave me a hug, which my dad doesn't do. And even I felt awkward because I don't do things like that. I'm not really that way either. But it was his way of letting me know that he is vulnerable, and he was saying thank you because I was there. And that to me took guts. For him, for the first time in his life, to be able to say that he realised he's not the person that he's still thinking in my eyes that I see, but I see what's in front of me. But it was him that thought he had to be that. And that was quite a powerful moment for me, for him to open up and be that vulnerable, to let me see it. But did I think ashamed? Did I feel bad for it? Did I feel his disclosure changed him or weakened him? No. It actually brought him up in my aspirations, and it brought him up in my eyes as to be, I don't know if he could even be bigger than what he was in my eyes anyway, but to be more special because of the fact he would do that with me in that moment. And it made me think then that all his life is something I say to clients that I work with them, is they have to remove the mask of the persona. Because we wear them every day, whether it's professionally or personally, because we try not to be vulnerable. We try not to show weaknesses, or we don't want people always to know if we're going through situations that's not the way we want people to see us. So we try and hide it. And what I mean mask, I mean a metaphorical mask. I don't mean you put something on. But the persona we put on is like an actor. An actor puts all these things on for each part. You know it's the same person. You can see it's the same person. but they have to be, you believe it's not, because that's that role they're doing in that film, and that's what you do all through your life. Well, you realise that not, because you don't tell everybody everything that's in your life. You don't give them all the details about it. You give different people different amounts. I don't actually know if you give anybody everything. I know when I thought about it recently, I spoke to someone the day and said, I looked in the mirror and it reminded me of a song years ago. She's like the wind. Paddy Swayze, and I'm not somebody you would think I was a singer, but it was from Dirty Dancing, and the line it was, he looked in the mirror, a young old man staring at me. And that's how I felt lately, when especially I've been ill, is in my mind I was young, but when I looked in the mirror it was older. And then my dad did that. And it was very weird because that's the way I thought of myself, but he's now done the same thing. Looked in the mirror, seen something and went, that's not who I thought I was. But it's not changed him. It's made him better in some ways. And I think we all do that. The problem you get is sometimes when I look in that mirror, I had forgot who I was. I could think each was myself. I wouldn't know where to stop. Which one was actually me? And it's took this journey for me to find that again and find who I am. And actually, I think make a better version of me than what I was. The problem became when I looked at the bits of bottom and how I got to that was the brick wall that I'd built or constructed around me so that I'd stayed safe, so I didn't look vulnerable, actually stopped or prevented others from actually getting close to me or knowing more about me. Even the work environment, I was very good at keeping my personal life out of work and only being the professional, the person at work. I would be able to tell one or two little things about me, what kind of sport I liked, what I liked cooking, things like that, just, or my wife, just so there was things you could talk about in it so I could mix, but not enough that people would know what was going on until all this happened. In fact, a lot of them didn't know until the podcast came out, which didn't go down well with some and with others. And if in a nice way, they wished they'd known earlier because they could have helped me earlier. I just didn't know how to ask for help. I wish I had done. I wish I'd done it earlier. But what thing that made me really a bit vulnerability was someone in a group I'm in, and I owe these people a lot. They've been amazing. It's an accountability group I do in the morning, 7 o'clock, by the way. It's not always the best thing people think about it, but it sets you up for the day. And every one of them are amazing. They all have their own attributes to things. But one day we were talking with someone, they told me to listen to someone called Brené Brown. I'd never heard of her. She's a scientist. And in 2010 or 2011, so I've seen two different versions or dates of this, I'm not sure which one was the right one. She brought a paper out and did a TED talk on vulnerability. It's called The Power of Vulnerability. And I'd already been planning this and writing this out, but I decided to have a look at it in case there's anything I could add from her. And it was amazing. Listen to the research she'd done, listen to the way she described it. It was as if I was standing on that stage with her talking. I felt all these feelings that she was saying, but there was a couple of things that I really loved about her. And one of the things she said, and there was another interview after the back of that one, and she'd spoken to, I think there were special forces, but armed forces anyway in the States. And she was asking someone to give a definition of an incident where they were totally courageous. Maybe not them, but they might know of somebody they were with or somebody in their unit or whoever, but someone they knew, personally knew, who was totally courageous, and to describe what it was like. And when they were doing that, they were talking about things like they took risks into a place it was uncertain if they could get in or out, but they had to do that. They had to give emotionally, just let their emotions go, just take over and be exposed. They might have fear, whatever, but they had to get through that because of whatever it was, whether it was dealing with someone from an ID or dealing with someone being shot or whatever, they had to go and break through their own fears to do that. And what she said was, so you're saying that to be courageous, you have to take risks, you need to be uncertain and emotional exposure. And they said, yes, she goes, well, does that not mean that courage cannot be without vulnerability? Because the definition of vulnerable, as we just talked about, is people who are willing to take risks to put their emotions out there, emotional exposure, and being uncertain of how it's going to be reacted or how people are going to deal with that. So she put the two together saying, can you ever have courage without vulnerability? And I thought that was an amazing question. And it made me really think, therefore, if someone says to me, these two people, and there's been 2 or 3 in the last week, plus said someone previously when I started the podcast, I thought when they were saying to me that you're vulnerable, maybe what they're actually saying to me is, you're courageous. They might not realise that, they might not meant it in that way, but that's the way I'm going to take it. Because if it's the same definitions for courage as it is for vulnerability, then because let my vulnerability out, if I can show other people they can be courageous by doing the same, I'm very happy to do that. So vulnerability is about showing up and being seen. It's tough to do that when you're terrified about what people might see or think. And that first episode, that podcast, a lot of people know me well, know what I've said. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life because I'd hidden that illness from so many people. Even in the podcast, I didn't get through everything. I went through enough that people need to know there's other bits I didn't. And that's my choice. It was to get through that. Explaining about the bullying and everything last week is the same. It's my choice. But if people can listen to this and say, well, understand that they feel all these things, then stop letting other people make you think a certain way. Think it because of the way you want to look at it. And that's what I'm taking from what she said. Because to feel vulnerable means you're alive. Because if you feel that emotional about trying to hide it or do it, then obviously if you let yourself get it out, then you're worried about everything, you're alive. Is that not something special? So more than worrying about it. Vulnerability helps us not only build relationships, but also experience our feelings more deeply. It's another one of the things she said I thought was brilliant, is you're worried about because you're letting people know your feelings, but it actually lets you explore them as well. And if you explore your own feelings like that, you might look at them in a different perspective, like I am. And last, I think this is probably the most important, is she says to believe that we are enough. Because when we walk from one place of I believe, that says I'm enough. So my vulnerability, what people thought was a weakness or thought maybe it could damage what I do, I don't look at it that way because I know I am enough. I don't have to worry about any of that anymore. I'm not worried if someone else thinks a certain way. That's their perspective on it. It's not mine. So if they think whatever I've done that way, I'm happy with that. I accept that. That's theirs. I acknowledge it. That's their opinion. But then I just let it go. It's not mine. She said something like, then when we stop screaming and start listening, we're kind and gentle to the people around us. And when we're kinder and gentle to ourselves, then we'll be kind to others. And that's amazing, because that's something that is really difficult. When I thought all of this and how I was trying to finish it up and what would that say or mean, that's what it was. It's the fact that you need to have compassion for yourself. You need to accept who you are. And until you do that, you can't do it with anybody else. But if you can do it with yourself, you won't feel vulnerable. Or if you do get those emotions of vulnerability, you can deal with them. I'm going to give a couple of things here, just hopefully it'll help. After all, if we embrace our own vulnerability, this can help us to build relationships, but also experience our own feelings, as I said. There's nothing better than that. So if you do feel what you call vulnerable, or in your opinion, notice how you speak and the body language you portray, because that gives a lot away to people. When I was saying about the vulnerability and the way I talk about it now, I talk about with a sense of confidence because that's how I feel about it. But not everybody will. But normally when you do it, you sort of talk from a place of being, you might walk or sit with your shoulders down and hunched down and your head's down when you talk. You don't actually look at anybody. That is your unconscious mind way of seeking attention or of saying, I don't really want to talk about it. So stop that. Lift your head up, open your chest up, speak strongly. And by doing this, you'll start to feel more confident in yourself. And the vulnerability or the emotion of that will disappear. The second one is very obvious and most people realize is exercise. If you feel physically stronger, you feel emotionally stronger, it helps you to feel more secure. So try and do some exercise every day. Even if it's only half an hour a day. I tell most of my clients I work with that. It's amazing if you can get yourself out in some fresh air. I appreciate it's not always the best weather now, but getting yourself even in that rain, it invigorates you. As long as you're wrapped up well enough, you go out just for half an hour, that's all you need to do. You will see a big change. Also, if you can do that, you do that and you start eating better, you'll sleep better as well, which again can make you feel better in yourself and you feel more confident. Make a plan. It sounds a weird thing to say, but make a plan of what you do when those emotions will come back. When you feel worried or you've got a problem, your mind loves plans. Your mind loves to work things out. Say, okay, if I start to feel those emotions again, what am I going to do? What makes me feel better? For me, headphones, stick them on, stick on my Amazon Music or my Spotify, and I can just while away in that, get myself a book, a Kindle, a book. I can disappear for a while. And by doing that, I don't let those other thoughts come in because I'm concentrating on them. And that's my way of dealing. That's my plan. You need to find yours. And stop the what ifs. See all these thoughts, what if this happens? What if that happens? What ifs, they never going to happen. Thoughts are nothing unless you give it an emotion and action. A thought's just something in your head. Acknowledge it, accept it, and let it go. Your aim is to always be in the moment. So if you keep thinking ahead all the time, you can't live in the moment. But if you can stay in the moment and just live day by day, as this way, as your thoughts are in at that moment of time, do I need someone else to know about what? No, I don't. Then leave it that way. Take the enjoyment from being in the present, being focused on what is happening right now to you. Just don't let that vulnerability bit rob you of presence. Be there for yourself in a moment. And something that really is important to me, remember and always, always celebrate any little wins and successes. Doesn't matter how small it is, how big it is, because when you feel good about yourself, you feel wired, you feel to remind yourself. And we're set as humans to always remember about our failures. Don't we? It's the first thing you always say, I did 10 things good today, oh, but I did this. So the only thing you really go to is the bad thing. And when someone hears that, there was a thing that recently posted on Facebook about Einstein doing the 9 times table. Now, like 9 times 1 is 9, 2 is 18, 3 is 27. It was doing it anyway, so one of the numbers is wrong. And somebody commented on it, haha, you've got that one wrong. And what Einstein's thing was, how come I did 11 right, but the only one you picked up on is the one I didn't do right? So 11 things right, 1 wrong. It's a bit imbalanced, isn't it? But that's how we think. So if you celebrate successes, you stop thinking that way. You say, yeah, but I got 11 right. Yeah, I got 1 wrong, but 11 right out of 12, that's not bad. Celebrate them. Therefore, if you feel that you cannot think of successes, if you're trying to find them for that day and you're going, I don't really know if I've got them, then just imagine it. What would it be like if you had been successful that day? What would that have felt like? What would it look like to you? What would you get a sense of? And if it really helps, write them down. Again, it's something I do with people. Write down 3 things that you had that day you were successful at, or you were grateful for, or you think went really well. And the next morning, relook at them. Because sometimes when you sleep on it and you look back, you realise they're a lot more powerful than you thought. You've done more than you actually think. So try that. And lastly, self-reflection. It helps you to take a closer look at your own actions, but also the way you deal with occasions or people, especially when you're having problems or having feelings of worry or stress. And this allows you to improve on the plans we were talking about earlier. If you make your plan, if you reflect on things and when it happens again, what could I have done better? What could I have put in place? It means that each time you come up against a situation like that, they will improve. I think closing on it would be the thing that she said, that Brené Brown said, is I think because when you feel this vulnerable, it means you're alive. There's not a better feeling. When you wake up in the morning, you're alive, whether you're vulnerable or not. That's a good start to the day. Just feeling that one feeling, just celebrate the fact you've got up, you're fine, you're great. What am I going to do today? That should be your first question. What am I going to do today for me? So the vulnerability doesn't matter. Stop worrying what everybody else thinks. Start thinking, look from your own heart. What do you feel like inside? What does it matter to you? If we can help in any way, got here, contact me, Tony Gordon at changingyourmindlimited.com, and the limit as usual is LTD. So Tony Gordon at changingyourmindlimited.com, or look at our website, changingyourmindlimited.com itself. Maybe there's something there that can help. If I can, if there's anything you want, if you're off the back of this or something else maybe you want to talk about, or like this came off the back of the last episode, then let me know and I'll do the same as I've done here. I'll go and do it. I've got 3 guests coming up over the next 4 or 5 weeks to look at their situations and what they've been through, and they're really powerful ones. But if there's anything else you want, or if there's anybody else like them out there that's been in touch, then I'm more than happy to get you on, and you can give your side and let people know. Whatever you've been through, if you can help one person, they help 3, they help 6, they help 9, whatever. It just keeps spreading. So you have a big ripple of what you can do for other people. So please, if there's anything you think of it could help, what you've been through, and your story could help, let me know and we'll get you on and help other people, just like you've helped yourself. Thank you everybody for listening. So this is Tony Gordon, break free from your monkey mind, and we're back next week with another episode. And that one for next week is going to be looking at awareness. What does it actually mean to us? And what is awareness and how can it help us? So thank you very much again for joining me today. Appreciate it. And most of all, take care of yourself. And please don't feel vulnerable in anything you do. Use the vulnerability as something positive in your life. Bye-bye.